Welcome to The Great Transition, a new episode series that we're going to talk about hybrid work and its impact on other facets of companies, not just IT issues. Today, I'm really excited to have Vivek Chakraborty from the Covey Group. Vivek, thanks for coming today. Tell us real quick, give us a little bit of background on yourself, and then talk a little bit about the Covey Group as to how you help customers today.
Hi, Nathan. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm the CEO of Covey Group. My background is crisis management and business continuity. I've been doing this for over 20 years now. And so Covey Group, as a management consulting firm, specializes in helping global companies with crisis management and business continuity.
Awesome. And this is the perfect start entry point of this topic, because we've been talking about hybrid for quite a while now. And that's why we call it the Great Transition, because everyone's doing hybrid or doing some version of hybrid. They're starting to transform their businesses because obviously things are changing rapidly as we think about all the different facets of what's happening in business. But I think crisis management is interesting because, as you probably know, and you've lived it for 20, almost maybe 3 decades now, right, in your work that you've been doing, you have to keep your plans updated. As your company grows, you have to keep things updated. But when the pandemic hit, everything changed. And we're still changing, right? A lot of people are struggling to figure out what's happening. So in your view, since you're looking and you work with customers of all sizes globally in terms of crisis management as well as business continuity, what do you think are the top 3 things that people need to rethink as people adopt hybrid, or even now, I would say it's post-hybrid already? What do you think about that?
I think that's a great context for what we've seen happen over the last 3 years. So if you think about starting January 2020 and now we're entering January 2023, over that period, I would say the 3 things that we've experienced alongside our clients. First is this always on factor. As a result of moving to a virtual environment, surrounded by technology, working from home, there's a very high potential for burnout, especially for crisis management teams and business continuity teams who are working under stress. The second area that we've seen affect crisis management and business continuity is the concept of a virtual war room, which requires a lot of practice to become proficient in. Teams were very used to going into a war room in their offices, and they understood the dynamics, the interpersonal dynamics, the communication protocols. Everything is different in a hybrid virtual environment. And then the third area that we're seeing directly impact crisis management and business continuity has to do with privacy and confidentiality of information and information sharing at the time of crisis.
The first one really hits home for me and my friends and my peers and my colleagues over the course of the pandemic, because many people, you mentioned crisis management, business continuity teams. There's all sorts of people that have been completely burned out by the fact that, now all of a sudden you're always available, or you make yourself available, which is that could be my fault in many ways because I had never shut off. And so it's definitely affected me. And I know during the pandemic, I burned out quite a few times. And then once you get the balance of trying to say, okay, this is work, and this is like your own personal family time, you have to draw the lines and figure out your schedule. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So tell me about always on, because I know that's a big topic.
Where you see always on really affect crisis management teams is in the lack of bench strength. So there's a tendency to zoom in on the most proficient or knowledgeable person or the leader. So a lot of crisis teams are comprised of leaders of their verticals, and there's an over-reliance on them. Right? And when you go into an always on model, especially with crisis management, they have other hats and other roles they have to fulfill within the organization. Now you've put them into a crisis management primary role while they're trying to do their day job. It becomes unsustainable. And so really, if there's burnout, you can go look at the root cause is usually lack of a bench strength, or the secondaries and alternates who have been put in the bench are not comfortable taking over that primary role. So the primary is still stuck.
Yeah.
Right. So there's something to do there with the behavior and the culture that has to change. And so we spend a lot of time with our clients, not only building the bench strength, but making sure the bench can step in at any time to replace the primary, to give them that breathing room so there is no burnout.
Now, what kind of timeline are we talking about? This doesn't happen. This is not a flip switch. This doesn't happen overnight, right? This is
Correct.
what, 6 to 12 months of constant
Could be.
coaching and developing?
Absolutely. And it could be, the timeline to implement something like this really comes down to the team's desire to have it be ready and usable. So this comes down to exercises, and it ties to the second issue we saw with the virtual war room. Some of the hesitancy of the primaries to step away is because we've moved into a new media technology platform of managing crises. If you're in a room, someone is shadowing you physically, there's a comfort level because they see the dynamics. It's very different when you join a crisis team in progress. There are 20 people on the call. They all know each other. They're already in the mix of it. You've joined as the alternate. Now, what do you do?
Yeah.
How do you join in? You feel like an outsider. So there's that piece of it. And what we've done with our clients is a lot of exercises. I would say the best in class companies in crisis management exercise their teams once a quarter.
Oh,
And they
wow.
don't have to be full blown out exercises, you know, the 3 hour, 4 hour variety. We're talking about 30 minutes. That's all you need. 30 minutes, make some time, get the team on, have a very specific focus, teach them one of these aspects and let them go away. Bring them back another quarter, train on another aspect of crisis management. And so what you're doing is building muscle memory. And each time you do this, you bring in the alternates. And so you're changing the dynamic of the team. The first exercise could be all the primaries. The second exercise could be all the backups. The
Yeah.
third exercise is a mix, and they don't know, only you as the facilitator know what the mix is. And then the fourth one is a different mix. And so you're starting to create all these combinations of people who feel comfortable with each other in crisis mode.
What's interesting is that I think back probably a decade ago, and we would probably talk about this at some point, but people would do a test once a year, and it was
Mhm.
mostly the most important IT system that would fail over.
Right.
Not, and some, I mean, the bigger companies obviously would focus on making sure their executives were distributed and the roles were, like they were actually doing these tests already, but it was mostly once a year. And
Hmm.
things were so much simpler. There was no cloud a decade ago. Like, think about
That's
all the
right.
different things that happen. So actually, maybe a decade and a half ago, there was no cloud, maybe, but just the start of it. So yeah, it's fascinating that so much has changed, and it seems like, I mean, that would require a lot of planning and definitely a lot of time to build that muscle memory, like you said.
Correct. And what you're starting to see now are not single factor events, right?
Yeah.
You're starting to see multi-factor events. So you have geopolitical tensions, whether it's China, Taiwan, Ukraine, Russia, which before would be a unidimensional, one-dimensional issue, which had to do with life safety. But now you've got the cloud. So you've got data centers in those countries. Now you've got
Yeah.
affecting your operations. You've got supply chain issues. You've got privacy issues with data of customers getting caught up in this thing. So now you
Inflation,
have
lockdowns, like it's
everything,
just
put
every
it
day it's a
all in
different
there.
story. Yeah.
And so now any crisis you're going to face, especially a global company, is going to be multifaceted. And so that means you have to be able to interchange your crisis team members because the priorities could change within the span of the same crisis. You could go from a legal uh, paradigm to a life safety paradigm to an operations paradigm to an IT paradigm. And so you can't even have the same chair. And this is what some of our teams have started to recognize is you have to be able to switch who is lead on any crisis management team at any point in a single crisis.
Wow. That's a lot to take in for sure. And that's just the first one, right? So you've
Yeah.
got two more. So you said, I think, virtual war rooms for the
Yeah.
next.
So
So give us context on that.
virtual war room is a perfect lead-in for this notion that you have to be able to be comfortable taking, not just bringing in an alternate, but that alternate may have to be the lead if their
Yeah.
area of focus becomes the key, right? And I'll give you an example. We had an incident with one of our clients, started out with a potential, let's say, life safety issue, workplace issue, which required global security, right? So the global security lead on the crisis team was the lead for the team. It so turned out that we found out it was actually a legal issue and a PR issue.
Huh.
was at the core of it. So now the lead role flipped from global security to communications. Well, the primary communications person is on vacation. The
Oh,
alternate had never actually sat in a crisis management team, was not familiar with the protocols, was not familiar with the virtual technology. So what do you do now? You can't go find the primary because they're not available. So this is where we bring those exercises and we make sure that the alternates understand the process, understand the protocols, understand the tools, can be proficient. If you're using Zoom, then you need to know how to navigate within Zoom
yeah.
because you're the one facilitating the crisis call. And so we focus on certain aspects like that. And that's where the virtual war room comes from. Now, there are companies that have released software that makes it easier, but there's a whole training element then. You have
Yeah.
to be familiar with the software. And actually, this leads directly to the third issue that
Hmm.
crisis teams have faced, which is the privacy and confidentiality. If I've never been trained on the tool and the protocol, I might join the call and start sending chats to the team members. I might
Yeah.
put things in a virtual chat that could become discoverable because I don't know what the protocols are because I've never trained and rehearsed with this team before. I bring in new people because I don't know what the delegation of authority looks like for purposes of crisis management. In a physical building, in a physical room, that's simple.
Yeah.
In a virtual environment, when you can just add people to a meeting, how does that protocol work? And so we spend a lot of time with our crisis management teams at our clients, building those protocols and processes, and then training the team so it becomes second nature. When you join a crisis management team, these are the templates you use. This is when you communicate. This is how you communicate. This is what you communicate, right? That takes a lot of exercising and discipline. And so we see these three, they're all interrelated. So you've got the always on factor, which
Yeah.
is the burnout, the virtual war rooms, and then privacy and confidentiality. And they're all interrelated and they
Yeah.
have to be worked on through exercises, through training, through onboarding. So you have the right bench strength.
So let me ask you a question. It's a lot more to ask of a person to do any of these things that you've talked about, and there's a lot there, right? Do you
Mm-hmm.
see pushback from teams, and how do you overcome that, or do you not see
Yeah,
pushback?
we do see pushback. We see pushback because everybody is busy. And the
Yeah.
folks that we're talking about, even on a crisis team, you might have the CFO and their backups are the controller and another VP. Well, they're all busy people. So where do they find once a quarter to dedicate to an exercise? Right. So
Yeah.
it's legitimately the case where they may not have the bandwidth, but then as a company, you have a choice. Do you want to experience it firsthand in the middle of a crisis? Or would you rather make the sacrifices ahead of time and make sure you have your protocols and processes in place? Once the teams start to get the hang of it, we've seen, like, again, going back to best in class, they make it part of their operating calendar. So instead of finding an additional time, if you have a leadership team meeting and that leadership team also comprises the crisis management team, the first 30 minutes of that meeting should be or could be a
Yeah.
crisis management exercise. So it becomes just part of your natural cadence. And we've started to see leadership teams doing that now, which is fantastic.
That's awesome. That's really great. So okay, there's always on virtual war rooms and privacy
And
concerns,
confidentiality. Yep.
confidentiality concerns. It's a lot, right, for the average customer or even organization to think through all of this. Leave us with a couple things people can do, because it's overwhelming. I mean, I'm overwhelmed,
Sure.
and I don't go through this every day. Obviously you do, I know that. What do you think someone, if they're starting from scratch, or they've adopted a hybrid model and they don't even know where to begin, what would you advise them to do?
Sure. I would say, especially in most big global companies, there's someone who's tasked with managing the crisis management program. And
Mm-hmm.
they are usually under a lot of stress because they're trying to do all of this and be best in class and innovate and keep the team moving.
Yeah.
Look for help. Come to a company like the Covey Group, find yourself someone who's been in the thick of it globally for the last 3 years, who can bring these types of insights to you so you don't have to live through it by experience,
Yeah.
right? Learn from somebody else's experience. So bring in an expert. The other thing you could do is there's a newly released ISO standard on crisis management. Just
Oh,
like there's
really?
an ISO standard on business continuity, there's now an
Wow. I didn't
ISO
know that.
standard on crisis management. Bring in someone who can help you assess your current state against that and take a look at it in context of a hybrid model, right? So you get a sense of where you need to grow and where your opportunities for improvement are. We've done that for some of our clients, so my team would be ready to do something like that.
Sure.
And then look at your protocols. I think a lot of companies focus on solving the problem, but they don't create the environment where the problem can be solved safely. And what I mean by that is make sure your legal team is available and has a chance to review the templates, the platform, the information sharing, the communication protocol, so that any inherent risks associated with a hybrid model can get mitigated before you discover it real time.
Yeah. I learn so much when I talk to you every single time. I wish I could retain it all like you do, but I don't. But this is definitely a really important topic as people transition, whether it's hybrid or not hybrid, or some version of hybrid or post-hybrid. Who knows what we're going to call it, this year in 2023. But I want to thank you, Vivek, for spending a little time with us. And if anyone who's watching or listening would like to learn more about Kavi Group, how do we find you?
So you can check out our website, www.thekavigroup.com, Kavi, or find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I post every week, almost once a week for sure. It's on crisis management and business continuity.
Great posts.
I
Seen
respond quite quickly to any messages that come in, and then I will get one of my experts in touch with you and we can go from there.
Awesome. Thanks again, Vivek. Thanks for being on the show. And thanks everyone for listening. And until next time, see you all later.
Thank you. Bye, Nathan.